Hi, my name is Alan Bentley from Vanderbilt University. I'm here to introduce to you today a new system we've been working on for processing of material transfer agreements. We call it MTAShare. MTAShare is basically a comprehensive, scalable process for tracking, generating, and transferring and executing material transfer agreements. The interesting thing about MTAShare is that it relies heavily on standardized documents, most notably the NIH's documents, the UBMTA and the Simple Letter Agreement, and the documents that Autumn has created, the variations of those to address human tissues, chemicals, plants, and other types of more esoteric materials. The system itself has three primary portions to it. The first one is called the provider survey. The system is launched with the provider institution scientist creating a survey, answering 20 very quick questions about the material, where it's going, what type of material it is, what type of quantities are we transferring. From that, the system creates an administrative record of the survey results, and the administrators of the survey, us, the tech transfer people or the contracts people, can go in and they can review and approve and send off the MTAs that are generated by the system based upon the survey. Documents sent to the recipient are sent electronically in PDF with warnings and explanations about what the material is so the recipient understands and can process those. Approval is done online through a click-through type of an approach. The system has been built in phases. Phase 1 has been completed here for Vanderbilt, and we are now launching it for our internal use. It manages only outgoing MTAs. It does not manage incoming MTAs at this time. There are future phases planned. We're going to put in a requester-initiated front end so that the provider could start the MTA request, or a requesting entity could start the MTA request in advance. And there'll be different user preferences, different starting documents, starting MTA templates to use. It'll just depend on the individual group to decide what their preferences are. We will have the capability for extreme automation, where in certain cases, like when the UBMTA is being used and there are no unusual circumstances, the system can actually create the MTA, generate it, send it out, get it approved, all without either party even seeing it. We'll run to a live demonstration of the system and walk through that as quickly as we can to give you a sense of it. It's an easy 20-question survey. The survey is broken up into pieces. It starts with the provider institution. Let's do a quick example. Vanderbilt University, provider scientist. After identifying the parties and information about the parties, we ask several things. The first things we ask are, is the material that's being transferred encumbered in any way? Was the material developed from a third party or a derivative of a third party? You can just simply hit yes or no. If it is, say which third party, where did it come from? Columbia University. So you ask a series of quick and easy questions about where the material came from and how it's to be used. Then you have to simply go through a list of what is the type of material that you're sending off. Is it a cell line? Is it human tissue? Stem cells? Small molecules? Large molecules? There's a variety of different types of materials that can be sent. And you quickly identify what the materials are. The scientist, we've tested this as a very easy time of going through these things and giving the necessary information. The last portion of the survey asks you for any contract restrictions. Now, these are restrictions that the provider will be placing on the recipient institution. You could set a time limit for use of the material. If you want a time limit, maybe you want to limit their use to 2 years. So you can simply do that. Do you want to charge additional fees? Well, maybe not. Do you need to add any additional restrictions on use of the material? These are provisions that will be added to the MTA before it's being sent on to the recipient. And then you can date stamp this for auditing purposes and submit. Once the provider scientist has submitted this, they get a quick summary of the material request to make sure that everything is accurate, and then they finally hit submit, and things are entered into the administrative portion here of the system. Once the provider scientist hits submit on the survey side of things, an email is sent to the designated inbox. Here we have an email set up to MTA called MTAshare, and it just lets us know that a request has been made. You can simply go into the system and check on the request. A section called Command Central opens up. Command Central allows you to do several things. It allows you to put a unique identifier to track it using your own numbers. It allows you to assign a manager to the system. Maybe someone in my office, Karen Rufus, is to be assigned. We'll put her name by it. You can identify the signatory. The system then points you to certain warnings. We can take a look at what those encumbrances and contractual restrictions are by going to the actual survey. So the encumbrance here is that the material was derived from or a modification of a third-party material that it received. And so now I, as the administrator, as the manager of this, will want to go in, look at the MTA that governs the transfer of that material to our institution that we then modified, and to make sure that I have the right to modify it and have the right to pass along any of those derivatives to third parties. So I can look at that agreement and I can clear that. In addition, if you remember for the contract restrictions, the restriction here is simply placing a 2-year timetable on the use of the materials. So I can probably clear that fairly easily as well. So I will go back to the Command Central. I've identified what the encumbrances are. I have reviewed them, both, which sets my encumbrance level to 0. I could even put in comments. So for instance, have rights to prepare derivatives. Just a note to myself that I've actually looked at that and I've seen the document. So that's a great thing for auditing and compliance purposes. I can also add additional comments about it. I can upload documents as well. And the survey that was filled out by my provider scientist was fairly vanilla. And because of that, the system chose the UBMTA as the governing MTA to create and send on to the recipient. I can go and actually I can force it to use the autumn version of the MTA. I can force it to use a simple letter agreement. But I'll go with the default for this example. I'm fine with everything here, so I will approve this and I will date stamp it, time stamp it, and then I will save my record. So now we have a survey request fulfilled by the provider scientist, and then we have administrative approval of the MTA to be sent out. The system, once approval is received, creates an MTA, the UBMTA in my example, based upon the answers that the provider has given, the provider scientist has given, and automatically sends that MTA on to the recipient at the email provided. This is the email that goes to the recipient. Click on the link, because it says you've gotten a new MTA request, and the recipient sees this. This is for the recipient signatory. And so it gives you a summary of the MTA. It's a cell line, 100 milliliters, it's from Vanderbilt. The UBMTA is what was used. But we do have some red here, some warnings. We are forcing the UBMTA into a 2-year term, a limited 2-year term, which the UBMTA can handle, of course. And so that just lets them know that what the change was. You can always take a look at the contract by clicking here. The contract will open up, and you can scroll through it and identify the 2-year time period. If an autumn, here's 2 years right here. If the autumn MTA was selected, and there were other encumbrances, like you had to pay $1,000, or you could only use it on Tuesdays, or whatever the case may be, whatever the limitation may be, then those warnings will be very helpful in identifying for the recipient how to find those warnings very quickly. But again, this is rather plain vanilla, so I can come in here as the recipient signatory. So I can use those. And I enter in my information, and then I click agree. And the reason why I have to enter in my information is because once upon my agreement, I'll go back to the contract now, and I'll look at it. The system automatically puts my information here into the contract to show that I have agreed to the contract. The provider information is already in the system. You can see a notice has come up right here saying that we've agreed to this. You can send the materials now. So that's how fast the system is. Seconds after the recipient has agreed to the system, the provider is already getting an email indicating that it's okay to send the materials. So I think that's a fantastic aspect of the system. The final contract can be downloaded right now. I can hit save here, but the system also automatically goes to sends notices to the provider scientist and the recipient scientist, everyone involved, and says the contract is done. Here's a copy of the contract for your edification. Back on the admin site, if I look down here, the system has already uploaded the MTA that's been duly approved into the system, and it is automatically date stamped when that was received. So we know up here when the request was made or when the approval was made by the provider, and we now also have a date stamp for when the MTA was approved by the recipient. So it's great for compliance and auditing. And we simply look at that, forward this to a completed system, and then it just moves on. Never have to look at it again unless I want to get another copy of the MTA itself. That's basically the system in a nutshell. We're looking to expand use of the system to as many users is absolutely possible because the system becomes more and more efficient as you have more and more users. It's a fantastic system, and hopefully it'll bring a lot of automation to this industry in the future. Thank you.